Products for buildings are fit for their purpose and users are provided with accurate product information. If you look at the activities of the CCPI already, one of the key things that's come from them is a principle of clarity and accuracy. Bodies like the Building Safety Regulator are actually having teeth now and having the ability to prosecute. What we're seeing now raises the bar significantly. Product data has to be accurate, complete, traceable, up-to-date, and evidence-backed. One of the key changes that is coming is
Welcome back to the Pimberly Perspectives podcast. My name's Alex McConnell, the host, and today I have a returning guest, in fact, to the podcast, who's going to impart some more knowledge on us. Tim Bodill. Hi, Tim. How are you doing?
Hi, Alex. Thanks very much for the invitation again. I'll do my best. Imparting knowledge sounds a bit scary, but I'll share what I know.
You're the man for the job, Tim, no doubt. Last time we spoke a bit about some of the data challenges for IT distributors. Today we're going to switch our focus to the building materials sector and some of the challenges that all the businesses in this area face and should be very interested in. Compliance. There's a lot of regulation and compliance issues popping up. We talk to customers all the time about it and prospects across the industry. So Tim, do you want to just start by telling me a bit about your job role, how that relates to compliance within construction?
Yeah, sure. So my title is VP for Digital Product Passport, which was really focused originally on the new legislation from the EU under ESPR, rolling out a requirement for better product information to be accompanied for all products that are being sold over the course of the next 5 years. And the first tranche of that legislation is building materials. And unsurprisingly, there's a lot of other movement in that space with other bodies being formed and other legislation being introduced. So it made absolute sense for me to dig a little bit into that and make sure that what we're doing with Pimberly over the course of the next few years supports our customers in making sure that they will be compliant with whatever comes out of the next set of legislation.
Yeah, it's a time of a lot of change. But first of all, before we dig into all that, can I talk about what we really mean by product data in construction? You know, what is in the scope of that? Because it's not just, attributes like the length of a screw or the dimensions of a door or something, is it? It's more than that.
That's absolutely right. Obviously, product data goes well beyond the basic attributes of the product. But I think just before we move too far away from that, if you think about the simple attributes that you've just described for any product, they're one of the urgent needs that comes with all of this new legislation is a common language to describe those dimensions. Because as you can imagine, if you think about something like a window, the thermodynamic properties of the glass in the window may be described in several different ways by different manufacturers, making that very difficult for the end user then to interpret and compare accurately. So whilst what we're looking at here are regulatory declarations, performance characteristics, test evidence, certifications, installation and maintenance information, safety information, that it's a lot more than just the attributes. But even the attributes themselves of the product is a whole challenge in itself, just finding a common language that everybody can use.
Yeah, and regulation, like you say, is a huge consideration in this space. As it should be. It's a very critical kind of area where the difference between getting it right and getting it wrong could be life and death in some cases, right? And the government recently published a single construction regulator prospectus to more tightly control this, how this industry is regulated. So for listeners who haven't read through it, what is this prospectus proposing at a high level? What problems is it trying to solve in the way UK construction is regulated?
Yeah, I mean, what you've said there, Alex, is absolutely spot on. We have to mention the tragedy at Grenfell, which was a huge catalyst in terms of activity around compliance and regulation that simply didn't exist before. And yeah, the prospectus that you refer to does propose a much more joined up and a much more outcome focused regulatory model with bodies like the Building Safety Regulator, a relatively new body, actually having teeth now and having the ability to prosecute. But I think that I'm going to read, because I don't want to misquote any of the prospectus, but there are four outcomes that are described in the document on several occasions, which are: buildings and built environments are safe, high performing, and deliver a healthy, accessible, secure, and sustainable environment for occupants. These, remember, are headlines underneath which legislation, individual legislation, will be drawn. Companies and individuals are enabled to thrive when they operate in the interests of current and future building users. It's important to protect the building industry and make sure that people that behave properly succeed within that environment. Products for buildings are fit for their purpose, and users are provided with accurate product information. And we're going to talk inevitably a bit more about that, because there is at last a focus on providing the right product information, and also then providing the ability to go back and look at historic information for historic projects as well. And lastly, the building system is trusted, and users have confidence that the system will act to prioritize the safety and needs of occupants. So as I say, they're fairly broad brush headings, but I think what will come from that is some very specific changes in legislation. And we're already starting to see some of that, but it is, I'll say now, it's very early days. There's a lot of players in there. There's a lot of people talking about their role in all of this. And I think there's some dust to settle yet before we see exactly how this is going to actually pan out.
Yeah, so we don't know the full shape of it yet, but obviously it's a big concern for the government, for the industry. So in some way, shape or form, it is something that businesses in this space definitely need to be prepared for. The objectives laid out in that document sort of reshape the expectations for product data quality, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, to say that there were none previously is probably a bit of an exaggeration, but there were very little requirements. And what we're seeing now raises the bar significantly. Product data has to be accurate, has to be complete, traceable, up to date, and evidence backed. Going back to the common language point I was making earlier, evidence backed in a way that everybody agrees, not just evidence backed on opinion. And under the CPR, the Construction Product Regulator, which will be, from what we see at the moment, from my interpretation of this, will be overseen in practice by regulators like the BSR that I've already mentioned, and guided by bodies like CCPI in terms of providing that data library, that common language that I referred to. Product data becomes a safety critical requirement now, and it has a value. If you don't have it, it has to be created. It's not an option, it's mandatory. Not like previously where it was perhaps more of a marketing exercise. This is now something that is going to be seen as much more critical in the whole process.
Yeah, I suppose it's more binary now in terms of, yes, you just need it. It's do you need it? Yes, no, yes, you do.
Absolutely.
But beyond that, I mean, it may be an obvious question, but what the real world consequences when that product is missing, is incomplete, inaccurate, or even just as bad, it might be there somewhere but inaccessible at the point of making a decision, whether you're a B2B customer, a tradesperson, or anyone who needs that information to make an informed decision.
Well, look, I mean, I'm certainly not going to take any sides on the matter, but if you look at the tragedy we've already mentioned at Grenfell, we're several years on from there, and still other buildings out of the something like 3,500 that were identified as needing remedial work in some way, there are still a significant number of those that haven't been addressed. And that's because this regulation and this quality of product data and the accountability that goes with that simply didn't exist. So I think that the real world consequences are that we end up in long delays with a lot of finger pointing and a lack of responsibility. The implications of providing better product data and mandating better product data are clear, that those situations shouldn't be repeated.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the supply chain in construction and building materials is very complex. When you're talking about getting product from the manufacturer through to a merchant all the way down to, onto the project, onto the building site even. It's got a long way to go. Where would that, you mentioned there's still challenges in getting this right, hence why we have all this new legislation coming in, right, to sort of wrangle it a bit. Where does it tend to break down this kind of process of getting good data quality?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and again, my interest here is product data quality rather than necessarily building manufacturing processes that have existed previously. But my observations are that there's a couple of things, really. One, I've already referred to, which is a lack of a common language. So people are using different measures, different standards, different whatever that might be, and you therefore have this mismatch throughout the supply chain if you are moving between territories, between countries that use different standards, maybe imperial metric. A whole host of things can go wrong through the lack of a common language. And not only the language, but at the point of handover, if you don't have data quality standards that have been mandated and are also common for everybody to see, then it's very difficult to know what kind of data you're going to get from your supply chain. And equally, it may be that the demands of your customer are different to the information that you're getting from your supply chain. So in my experience, those touch points where you don't have a common language and where you have a lengthy supply chain with various handovers and a lack of standards applied or mandated, those are the areas where there's lots of opportunity for things to either break down or disappear altogether. If you look at the activities of the CCPI already, one of the key things that's come from them is a principle of clarity and accuracy. Already you're seeing that those breakpoints specifically are being addressed. I'm having conversations with people on a daily basis about all sorts of legislation and compliance requirements. And we just happen today to be talking about those around building materials, where they should be heralded in many ways for the level of attention and the level of focus and the amount of activity that has gone in over the course of the last 5 years or so on improving regulation, improving compliance requirements, and the objectives I stated earlier from the CPR, I think are laudable.
Going back to some of the risks and you mentioned the tragedy at Grenfell and anytime anything like that happens, accountability is a huge issue. It takes a lot of time. Is that why governance and auditing and having clear ownership and all that kind of thing over who's responsible for all these things is so important in this area?
So without wishing to talk too much about the one incident, one of the key things about that incident was that it taught people an awful lot very quickly about the lack of information available about products that were chosen, about the reasons the product were chosen, about who chose them, etc., etc. So one of the key changes that is coming is that all of that will be mandated to be available. The product information, the details of the product, the specifications of the product, the supply chain ownership route, who chose the product, when was it specified, what was the checks done, what was the requirement, did it meet the requirement, and an audit trail of all of that, to my understanding, none of which has been mandated previously. So there's been no, as we've seen, as I mentioned earlier, how many years it's taken to remediate some of the identified problems. There's been no kind of easy, quick route to establishing responsibility and accountability.
We talked a little bit more about earlier about the different aspects of product data, what that means. Tying that to product information management, the kind of things that Pimberly is responsible for. What evidence should sit behind that product record in your PIM to support compliance or fitness of purpose, like you mentioned? You mentioned like certifications, installation requirements, and so on. How are those sort of captured and held to account when it comes to something like Pimberly?
So I think this is where I need to hold my hands up a little bit and say, obviously, we don't know yet what exactly will be required, what will be specified. But I think what it does is points to the underlying truth here, which is that product data is something that has an increasing value in any kind of transaction, and be that a supply chain transaction, be that a part of a project. If you as an organization are clear about your product data strategy, about where the product data is stored, having a single source of truth for your product data, not multiple copies or multiple versions, having clearly defined and understood processes for how that data comes into the organization and in what form it's allowed to exit the organization. I can't say it's going to guarantee and complete compliance every time. It's clear that managing your product data in that way and having a focus on that is going to put you in a much better position and create less work for you to do when it comes to the next set of compliance that comes along, or the next customer that comes along with their own set of requirements for the kind of information that they need you to provide them with.
Yeah, and there is something to be said here about efficiency, maintaining that while making sure your compliance is there. On that topic, we talked a little bit about automation before, but also AI, obviously the big buzzword on everyone's lips. Do you think the industry, the construction building materials industry, is ready to embrace that? And should it even for compliance, do you think?
Absolutely, 100%, Alex. I think we don't know what we don't know. There is so much being learned every day about what this new technology is capable of, and I'm certainly not the right kind of brain to sit here and give conjecture about what might be coming. What I can say is that AI allows you to process vast amounts of data vastly more quickly and efficiently than we've ever been able to do before. And so taking problems like the common language problem I described earlier would seem to me like something that you could expect AI to speed up the process, significantly improve a process. There will be ultimately a set of UK requirements and there'll be a set of EU requirements. And there will undoubtedly be some differences. AI will be the answer, in my opinion, of connecting those two different sets of requirements.
Makes sense. Yeah. Do you think a degree of human judgment needs to stay though?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm going to sort of reserve my judgment on it a little bit because I don't know what I don't know. I can only say that I almost on a weekly basis, I'm being shown a new system developed with AI technology that's fixing a problem that has been around for a long time, or a problem I didn't even know existed. I have to believe that AI will make a massive contribution to achieving better building safety. But of course, there will be always in my opinion, the requirement for human oversight.
You have to keep it safe and credible. Don't you? You need sort of those strong controls to make sure that we know how the sausage was made, right? It's not just throw it into the AI machine and just accept what comes out the other end, right? So across contractors, specifiers, merchants, distributors, building owners, across this whole supply chain, what are the biggest friction points in accessing and trusting products information? And what would materially improve those outcomes?
I mean, again, I just very quickly repeat myself in that a common language is going to be something that makes a big difference. But the other point I mentioned earlier around the supply chain and the various connections across the supply chain, I think is probably the thing that could have one of the biggest impact. Having a universally adopted data standard for building materials would be probably the single biggest step forward. that I can imagine. You know, how it's a problem I'd hate to underestimate, given the size of the portfolio, the number of parts, the number of moving parts, quite literally involved in that. But having at least some standards around the way that products are described, I think will make a big difference. Obviously, I'm going to say this: companies investing in a better understanding of their own product data, how product data comes into their business, what happens to it when it's in their business, and how it leaves their business. I see something that people are talking to me about a lot more than ever used to happen, and I positively encourage that we need to see more of that.
Okay. And when you're talking to people, you know, I'm sure people are asking you for advice on what do we do next? What do we do now? So, you know, looking ahead to the next 6 to 12 months, I know a lot is changing very quickly with this legislation, but say what are the top 3 actions to prepare for a more unified, data-led regulatory sort of regime?
Okay, so again, it's all about your product data. So whilst there's a lot still to come, there's a lot more information still to be provided, there is already plenty out there, particularly from people like CCPI, to help organizations to understand what kind of questions they may be asked about their product data. Action number 1 is to, as far as you possibly can, align your product data strategy around those expectations. Understand from those bodies what it is that's likely to be asked, and make sure that you're building your product data around that. Make sure you've got clear governance and ownership, and a clear audit trail for any product data that you've got. And underneath all of that, investing in structured digital product data platform is just going to take away so much of the pain in terms of how you address this problem. You know, I always want to say product data should not be seen as a fix to compliance for the building products challenge. Product data should be something that is managed within the organization, and the next thing that comes along is just another, almost a box tick exercise, because it will matter not just in compliance with legislation, but it will matter in your relationships with your supply chain. If your supply chain can't provide the data, that creates work for you, which has a cost to it. So it changes the value of that transaction potentially. Much more than just about compliance. A sensible product data strategy is going to save you an awful lot of time and money.
Perfect. Yeah. Makes sense. So coming to the end now, just want to say thanks again, Tim, for sharing your insights. I won't keep you too much longer. I think you might need a glass of water there. We've done a lot of talking. Yeah, we talked quite a lot, so I'll let you go. But thanks so much again for sharing your insights. And I know this is like an ever-changing sort of area, but for that reason, people are looking for guidance. So it's good to have someone who's done the reading and can impart some knowledge, like I said at the start there. So thanks again.
Thanks, Alex.
All right. Well, tune in next time for future episodes of the Pimberly Perspectives podcast. Or if you've not heard it, well, I suppose if you're in the construction industry, you probably won't be too interested in IT distributors. But if you just like the sound of Tim's voice, you can go back and listen to that episode too. So thanks for joining us. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.